Peace. I just wanted to take a moment and build further about the KRS-ONE video in regards to Freemasonry and Illuminati. I just put out a couple Periscope videos, and some of you may not be on Periscope, so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna record another video so that everybody could have access to what I'm talking about because there's some things that I wanted to elaborate on further that was in his video, and then there's other things that he did not mention that I think are key to people understanding that relationship between Freemasonry and the Illuminati. Um, One of the things that's vital is to understand that when we talk about Freemasonry or Illuminati or any of these other societies, that we are aware of who the true master architects and builders are and were. So when he talked about ancient Kemet, aka Egypt, handing over this knowledge or some of it to the Greeks and then them handing it over to the Romans and then the Romans handed it over to other European societies, that's vital to understand. It's also vital to understand that ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt weren't the only classical civilization or ancient ones that had knowledge that taught it to other societies in this world in order for them to gain civilization, live respectful lives, and learn how to build homes for themselves. There were other different societies of our people that are classical, that are indigenous, that are first world, that taught other societies of people like the Indus Valley in India, other different places around this world. So it's also important to understand and study those societies as well because these are also master architects or master builders. Now, when he talked about maritime law and international banking and the Rothschilds, the Trilateral Commission, as well as the Bilderbergs, you can't really talk about international banking and maritime law if you don't talk about the Knights Templars, because the Knights Templars are the ones that the Rothschilds, the Bilderbergs, as well as the Trilateral Commission, and other families like the Rockefellers, the Beers, the Oppenheimers, um, all of these different families, as well as international conglomerates, modeled themselves after because the Knights Templars are the ones that actually created the first international banking system, as well as made maritime law something that people begin to use as a system of governance over other different laws that may dictate the activities and the rules and regulations of the land. Now, what do I mean by all of this? When you go back and you study the time of the Crusades, you'll find that the Knights Templars were a group of Christian knights that came over from Europe that were charged of guarding travelers that were going over into the Holy Land, Jerusalem. Um, the Knights Templars, when they would go back and forth from Europe over into Jerusalem, they traveled with a fleet of ships. So the Knights Templars also had a naval fleet. And the common flag that most people are aware of when it comes to the Knights Templar is a white flag with a red cross on it. In terms of their naval fleet, the Knights Templar also used another flag called the Jolly Roger flag or the Maritime flag. If you Google Jolly Roger flag, you're going to see a flag that comes up that looks like what you have been told is a pirate flag, a black flag with a skull and crossbones on it. But that was originally a flag used by the Knights Templar that they flew on their naval fleets when they would travel back and forth from Europe over into Jerusalem. Now, at the time that the Knights Templars were considered guardians of travelers from Europe over into Jerusalem, their naval fleet and they were considered privateers. So a privateer is basically a guardian, a protector of the interests of a government or people that, are hiring them to guard whatever interest that they have. So when you Google privateers and pirates, you're going to see that relationship. At one particular point in the chronology of the Knights Templars, they went from being called privateers or recognized as privateers to being recognized and called pirates. They had the same exact flag, and that's the reason why when you research the Jolly Roger flag, you see it as a pirate flag. But originally, it was a Knights Templar flag. The other thing about the Knights Templar in establishing the first international banking system is some of the travelers that came from Europe over into Jerusalem were lords or other people who had wealth. They would deposit their wealth with the Templars over in Europe before they would travel overseas. And once they traveled overseas, whatever they deposited over in Europe, they had the ability to withdraw some of that wealth when they got over into Jerusalem. So this was the establishment of the first international banking system. So with the establishment of that international banking system, they amassed a great deal of wealth. They amassed so much wealth that they had kings borrowing money from them. So King Philip IV of France was actually indebted to the Knights Templars. So imagine the type of political clout and the type of wealth that they had amassed simply because they had the ability to lend money to kingdoms. You know what I'm saying? Additionally, because they were creating an international banking system, they also began to establish the basic elements of maritime law. Going back to what I just said, the flag that they flew on their fleets was a maritime flag. So in addition to them having a naval fleet and being invested in international commerce or an international banking system, they also were invested in maritime law, which governs not only the activities and the rules and regulations of how business is conducted or how you should navigate the sea, but it also, maritime law deals with the establishment of how you deal with international commerce. So the Knights Templar were also simultaneously developing the basic elements of maritime law. Um, so when you think about it, the planet Earth is 196,940,000 square miles. It's 57,255,000 square miles of land, 139,685,000 square miles of water. What that means is the planet Earth is 3/4 water. It's majority water. It's only 1/4 land. When people think about law, people are usually just thinking about law in regards to how you govern the activities or the way you conduct business on land. That is just a small portion of how the whole planet is governed. When you deal with maritime law, now you're getting into international commerce or international business, because when you think about the planet Earth being 3/4 water, maritime law governs the majority of the planet Earth. So a person that is in tune or has the ability to define the rules and regulations and the ins and outs of maritime law, they have more of a sense of control over the way in which international commerce, business, and banking is established all over the planet Earth. Because along with that system of international banking, you also have a system of navigation, which defines the way in which ships need to function or what they can and can't do on sea or in water. So the Knights Templar were not only just establishing an international banking system, they were also establishing the basic elements of maritime law. And the thing about maritime law is when you can determine what people can and can't do on sea, even to this day, commerce that travels on sea is still considered the most economical and the most frugal way to transport goods and products from one place to the next. It may take a little longer, but that is still considered the most economical way in order to transport stuff. It was the exact same way during that time. So you look at sea travel and international commerce happening on water, that was some of the earliest ways to deal with commerce. So the Knights Templars were into that, and they were also into establishing the banking institutions on the land that reinforces that international commerce. Some people didn't like that, especially people who were indebted to them. And King Philip IV of France was one of those people. So what he did is he conspired to be able to undermine that international banking system and strive to get some of that wealth from the Knights Templars. So what he did is he got together with Pope Clement V, and they brought Edward II from England in on it as well. And they said, yo, we gonna charge them with heresy. So King Philip IV is the one that came and got into Pope Clement V's ear and said, yo, they've been committing heresy against the church because they worshiping the devil, they spitting on crosses, they doing all this other stuff behind closed doors. Because as Knights Templars, they had certain rituals, ceremonies, and everything that they conducted in order to initiate other knights into their circle. What King Philip IV was doing was telling Pope Clement V that, yo, they doing some dirty shit behind closed doors. You need to check them about that or whatever, and this, that, and the third. So Pope Clement V was like, okay, we're going to do that. They brought King Edward II in on it from England. And on October 13th, 1307, they have what you call Black Friday, or Friday the 13th, where you get 13 being an unlucky number and everything else. That is the what they call the Knights Templar Heresy trials. So on October 13th, 1307 is when the Catholic Church through Pope Clement V issued a papal bull in order to say, yo, we about to get rid of these Templars. King Philip IV, Edward II in England, they all started to arrest the Knights Templars wherever they were, torment them, persecute them, and strive to get confessions out of them to say that they was committing heresy against the church. So you had the Grand Master of the Knights Templars, Jacques de Molay, who was actually burnt at the stake in the public for being charged with heresy. And you had other different Knights Templars being burnt at the stake, tortured, everything else. They didn't get all of the Knights Templars. Some of them got away and went underground. The ones that got away and went underground were the ones that took those ships and they began to sail and set roots in other different places. So at this time of the persecution of the Knights Templars, who were once seen as privateers and protectors of the church and protectors of the travelers, began to get demonized as pirates. Had the same exact flag, but now that flag was considered a flag of piracy as opposed to being a flag of being a privateer. And these Knights Templars who were able to go underground and get away, they also begin to take some of the wealth and to reestablish banks in other parts of Europe, not under the auspices of Knights Templars, but under the names and the faces of other people. So some of their wealth was confiscated. To this day, some of the Knights Templars' wealth is the foundation of the Vatican. Some of the wealth is the foundation of other different families or kingdoms that you see in different countries in Europe. But some of it was able to get redistributed to other places and to remain in the hands of the Knights Templars, but they changed their face and changed their name. So now, 1314, or during this time that you had the Knights Templars being persecuted and you had the heresy trials of the Knights Templars, the first time that you really begin to see them pop up in other places is Robert the Bruce had Templars fighting along his side against England. And one of the reasons why you had some Templars fighting against England is obvious, because King Edward II was responsible for arresting them and striving to confiscate their wealth and everything else, like King Philip IV of France did, as well as Pope Clement V. And when the Knights Templars begin to reemerge in other places, this is when you start to see the foundation of Freemasonry. So before this, there wasn't no Freemasonry in name. You had secret orders or societies going on, but you didn't have one called a Freemason. That only began to be something that was marked within the chronology of Europe when you started to see them first crop up in Scotland. So some people sit there and try to tell you, yo, the Mother Lodge was the first Masonic Lodge in 1717 in London, England. No. When you take that back all the way to the 1300s, you see the Knights Templars in Scotland fighting along the side of Robert the Bruce against England. Then you see, moving into the 1400s, you see the building of the Rosslyn Chapel. So Rosslyn Chapel, Rosslyn Chapel, was one of the first structures in Scotland that you see that in its architecture are both Knights Templar signs and symbols as well as Freemasonic signs and symbols. And it's in its architecture. Also, moving forward from the 1300s, 1400s, all the way into the 1500s, you start to see the establishment of not only banking systems in different places in Europe, but you also see other different Freemasonic structures being created. Um, in 1397 in Venice, you see the first bank being established by Giovanni Medici. So even to this day, the Medici family is a family name that rivals the Rothschilds and everything else in that particular part of Europe, because it's a family of wealth, because they started the first banking system, in Venice. In terms of Freemasonic lodges, you see the oldest Freemasonic lodges being established in Scotland. So one of the lodges is called the Kilwinning Lodge, and it's spelled just how it sounds: Kilwinning, Kilwinning Lodge. And then you also see the Mary Chapel or the Edinburgh Lodge, who are both respectively Lodge 0 and Lodge number 1. This is in Scotland, a couple hundred years at least before the establishment of the Mother Lodge in London, England. So some Freemasons don't want to give Scotland that kind of credit or whatever, but not only do you have the first minute book that is actually a document that goes back to Scotland that shows and proves that Freemasonry originated there, but you also have other different structures that represent Freemasonry that predates the Mother Lodge being founded in London, England in the 1700s. Another thing to keep in mind is when I talked about that transition from the Knights Templars being defined as privateers into being demonized as pirates, once you move into the 1600s into the early 1700s, you have what you call the Buccaneer period or the golden age of piracy. So prior to that, you don't see piracy. You see piracy beginning at the time of the persecution of the Knights Templars, and then them traveling to different other places to be able to take their wealth and to reestablish themselves in different places in Europe. But then you see them being demonized and called pirates when they were the ones that were persecuted to begin with. So this became the morning star of the Buccaneer period or the golden age of piracy. So also in the 1400s, you see people like Christopher Columbus, who was an explorer that was affiliated with the Knights Templars. You see Magellan, who was an explorer affiliated with the Knights Templars. You see thinkers like Sir Isaac Newton, as well as Da Vinci, who were affiliated with the Knights Templars, all in the 14 and during that particular period that were affiliated with the Knights Templars. And the key is to realize that you had what would be considered a transmutation. So in KRS-ONE's video, he talked about alchemy. This is a form of alchemy because you see a transmutation from the Knights Templars that went underground or that became a baser metal, because that's what they started off as. They started off as a baser metal, but transmutated their society into gold, an international banking system, something that solidified what maritime law actually became, that governed the way in which international commerce and business is done around the world. That is a form of alchemy. But then after the persecution of the Knights Templars, where they begin to become a baser metal again and go underground, they reemerged as Freemasonry, which became another form of alchemy because they reinstituted their international banking system under different auspices. So from the period of the 1300s going all the way up into the 1700s, you see this form of alchemy, or this transmutation of a society called the Knights Templars into the Freemasons. And then from the Freemasons, you start to see these appendant or these auxiliary bodies of other different societies popping up, usually established by Freemasons. So in 1773 to 1776, 1773, you have something called the Boston Tea Party that all of us usually learned in school. The Boston Tea Party was conspired by a group of Freemasons in a lodge called the St. Andrew's Lodge. The St. Andrew's Lodge in Boston, prior to that, was called the Green Dragon Tavern. When it was called the Green Dragon Tavern in 1764, the St. Andrew's Lodge actually bought the tavern and turned it into a lodge. So the founders of the Boston Tea Party were actually Freemasons. And they're the ones that actually set off the events that established the founding of America by other Freemasons. At the same time in 1776, where you see this founding of America and this Revolutionary War that went on, in Bavaria, Germany, you also see a revolution that's happening behind closed doors, which was the founding of the Illuminati. There was a Freemason named Adam Weishaupt who got together with another group of Freemasons that established the Illuminati. So his basis of establishing the Illuminati was to get thinkers together, people who were not just affiliated with like the church or that type of religious thinking, but people who had a determined idea of having dominance over not only the church, but also the government. So one of the things that you start to see that is consistent after the Knights Templars were persecuted is that the Knights Templar were affiliated with the church. They were, guarding people who traveled. They were Christian. When the church turned their back on them and they learned that lesson, when they reemerged as Freemasonry, they weren't affiliated with the church anymore. And that's the reason why, for many years, the Freemasons were considered anti-Catholic or anti-church. They were actually also behind the establishment of the Protestant movement that protested against the church. So you look at some time in this country where you had elections and stuff going on, where you had the Republican Party and stuff, you actually had a anti-Freemasonic party in the United States. And that's how anti-Masonic a lot of people were. And that was one of the lessons that the Knights Templar actually learned. They went underground, they reemerged and was like, I ain't affiliated with no church. I ain't gonna be affiliated with no religion this time. I learned my lesson. So, the key is that when they reemerged as Freemasonry, they also begin to establish other affiliated appendant bodies, such as you see societies like the Hibernians, and you see the Veiled Prophets, and you see the Tall Cedars of Lebanon, the Odd Fellows, the different fraternities and sororities that are all Masonically based. That was one of the lessons that the Knights Templars actually learned at that time when they faced that persecution on that Friday the 13th in October. So, those are some of the things that were not really elaborated on in that video in terms of KRS-ONE adding on about the Freemasonic Society and Illuminati. And, keep in mind that anytime somebody's talking about the Illuminati, if they're not talking about Adam Weishaupt and the founder of the Illuminati in Bavaria, Germany in 1776, they don't know what they're talking about. It's just as plain and simple as that. So, the same way that the Knights Templars were persecuted and they went underground, the Illuminati, when it was found out what they were striving to do, were persecuted and they went underground. So you see them begin to, because they were Freemasons anyway, you see them begin to reemerge in the form of associated with other different secret societies or open organizations with the same exact determined idea that they had when they were Illuminati. So as a historical organization, the Illuminati is no longer in existence. but the concepts, the ideas of international banking as controlling international commerce through maritime law, those determined ideas are still actually in practice, and you see them being carried out through, the Bilderberg, the Trilateral Commission, the Council of Foreign Relations, through various different families who have amassed a certain degree of wealth that keep it within the family, and deal with international commerce or trade amongst other families around the country. That's what people over the last few years have begun to define as the 1%. Here in America, we call them the 10%. They have the exact same determined idea. So, like some of my youth in my after school program, I was talking to them about the Illuminati, and some people have this mythical idea about the Illuminati, and this is shadowy figure, boogeyman, this, that, and the third that's controlling everything. But, in terms of controlling an economy or controlling information, controlling um, advertisement, controlling law or the criminal justice system, controlling institutions, any of those different ideas can be carried out by a person that is in a political position of power or a corporation. So you have some people that's talking about, yo, Kanye West or Jay-Z went and joined the Illuminati, this and the third. No, it may not be that. It may just be something simple as they made a business deal with a corporation that just doesn't work in their best interest. So essentially, they compromise their integrity or debase themselves in order to cut a deal that they're getting a short end of the stick on. You know that idea of, oh, they joined the Illuminati can be something just as simple as this person. That Illuminati could be Walmart because this person sat there and accepted a job in a position that they know take them away from their family, and they had other options, but they were so invested in trying to get some money or to get a promotion that they just took the job that has these irregular hours that cuts them off from having a relationship with their family. So that can be this person joining the Illuminati, you know, taking that job at Walmart. So it really has a practical application. It's not nothing that's mysterious or mythical or all this other stuff. But at the same time, you do have people who are in positions of power and authority that want to maintain that status quo, that position, that power, and that authority. And, it's not just a few people or whatever. And like KRS-One was saying in the video, a lot of these people are faceless. You won't even know who they are. You know what I'm saying? Because it may be the person that's behind the CEO. It may be the board of directors that you never see. Like, for example, you look at the Motion Picture Association of America, people don't really know who the members of the Motion Picture Association of America is, but they're the ones that define what the rating of certain movies are, which ultimately affects where certain movies and stuff could be shown. So if they sitting there and they give something an NC-17 rating, your shit ain't gonna be shown. But if they say, nah, we gonna give it a PG-13 or a G, you know, that means that your movie is gonna have the ability to be shown in various different venues just simply because of the rating. Now, some people could say, well, the Motion Picture Association of America is the Illuminati. And when you want to make films and stuff like that, and you're getting them judged and rated by them, then you join the Illuminati. So, like I said, there is really, as a historical society, the Illuminati was started in 1776. In terms of them, of that society operating in that way today, no. But the principles are still applicable because you still have people in positions that want to determine what are the quality of life, what is the quality of life of people around the world. So I know that I, talked for a little bit on this video, but it is no way to really cover this territory, in a very short period of time. So, if you have questions or whatever, I encourage you to go back and, you know, follow up on what I'm talking about and research it for yourself. A good book for you to check out is called Born in Blood. And that book is actually very insightful in terms of the relationship of the Knights Templars and that type of transmutation that I was talking about into the Freemasonic Society. And then, it doesn't elaborate a lot about the appendant or the auxiliary bodies of the Freemasons that were established after that. But, it's important to understand that there is a correlation and a link between all of them. So it's not no separate thing. I remember one time I went to a lodge because they had it open to the public, and one of the representatives of the Historical Society, the Masonic Society in New York State, was traveling around different lodges in New York State doing a presentation on the Knights Templar heresy trials. So sometimes you hear Freemasons sit there and try to tell you stuff like the Knights Templars, they're not related to the Freemasons, which is bullshit, because when people join the Masonic Lodge, the first lodge or the house that they enter is called the Blue House or the Blue Lodge. And that's where you get your first 3 degrees, your entered apprentice, your fellow craft, and your master mason degree. That's called the Blue House or the Blue Lodge. From there, you can either go to the Green Lodge or the Green House or the Red House. The Green House or the Green Lodge is the Scottish Rite. And like I said earlier, that is where you find the earliest lodges and the earliest documentation of minutes of lodges of members in Scotland. So you have the Scottish Rite, which are degrees that you learn, which is called the Green House. And you have the Red House, which is the York Rite, which is related to England. And it's more of the religious aspect, where you learn degrees that lead up to the Black House, which is the Knights Templar degrees. So you learn about the Knights Templars in Freemasonry, and they actually have degrees in the York Rite where you learn about that particular aspect of their chronology. Also, the Grand Master of the Knights Templars, Jacques de Molay, who was persecuted during that time of the heresy trials and burned at the stake, the junior Masons are called the Order of de Molay. So if you had young boys or whatever and they wanted to join the Masonic Lodge, why are they named after a Knights Templar if they don't have nothing to do with the Freemasons? So, you have that type of that kind of link and that kind of connection, which is important to keep in mind, because if you don't recognize those kind of links and connections, you can be misled by the type of associations and affiliations that determine these international conglomerates that really are defining not only maritime law, but are also defining the rules and regulations of international banking. So with that said, this was inspiring, empowering, it was educating, and gave those of you a little more insight on what I was building about in regards to that KRS-ONE video. Peace.